And the third critique, we said there's two, right? Number one, outright lies. Number two, distorted truths. Number three, and this is perhaps the most difficult, attacking the cultural norms of the time. Attacking societal values that might have been acceptable in 7th century Arabia, but are not acceptable in 21st century America. And this is really the most difficult, type of critique to defend, because the average human being is not an expert in sociology, in history, in ethics. The average human being simply thinks the cultural norms of his or her civilization are the correct cultural norms and values. And they don't realize that cultural norms and values change from time to place. The values of post-Victorian England are radically different than the values of 21st century America. The sexual mores of America 200 years ago radically differ from the sexual mores of the 21st century America. These things change. And so 7th century Arabia had its own issues, which were considered permissible by Muslims and non-Muslims back then. The most classic example, slavery. The Quran, no doubt, gave a lot of rulings for slavery. But let's be honest, it didn't come and totally ban it. It did ban alcohol. It banned many things, but it didn't banish slavery. It merely gave conditions. Now, in my humble opinion, the word slavery in the English language cannot be used in a positive sentence. And the Arabic concept of riqqa, of servitude, of slavery, is radically different than the Western concept of slavery. And so I think we are fighting a losing battle if we go into this tangent and try to defend it, for example. We just gloss it over and say that was something that happened in the past. Islam doesn't require slaves to exist. It's not a necessary condition. So these are cultural values. Another thing which we don't have time to talk about, but is definitely something very important, marrying Aisha at a young age, at the age of 9, for example. Okay, and I firmly believe, by the way, that Aisha radiallahu anha was 9 years old. I know that there are other opinions out there, and there's people trying to say that she was 18, 19. I think that historically speaking, it's quite clear that she was 9 years old. And if we open this door of trying to change our history, we're getting into other problems, which I might talk about in question and answer. In any case, the fact that the Prophet married Aisha at the age of 9, none of the enemies of Islam found this problematic. Abu Jahl, Abu Talib, if there was a lot, none of the enemies of Islam found this problematic. It was culturally acceptable. Just like 200, 300 years ago, it was absolutely acceptable for a 14-year-old girl to get married. Romeo and Juliet, do you know how old Juliet is in the play? She's 14 years old. Romeo is 15. This is in Shakespeare's time. In Shakespeare's time, Romeo and Juliet are 14 and 15 years old. And to him, this is something culturally acceptable. In our times, that's something, it's taboo. You just don't do that. Imagine if in Shakespeare's time, it was 14 and 15, backtrack another 1,000 years. The age of 9, the age of 10 was a mature age for those climates, for those cultures. It's a cultural value that has changed. Aisha, when she was 9 years old, was very similar to what we would consider a 16, 17-year-old of our generation, intellectually, mentally, and so forth. So this is a cultural value that they are attacking. And it is very difficult to defend because you usually need a little bit of intelligence in the person you're talking to. The person you're talking to needs to understand that culture changes. And many people don't understand that. So that is definitely one of the biggest challenges that happens.